Hello, and welcome to show number 2444 of Eyes on Success, a weekly program covering a wide variety of topics of interest to people with vision loss. I'm Nancy Torpey.
And I'm Pete Torpey. This week's show is a follow-on to last week's show about Aira and an Encore show in which we talked about how Aira helps someone run a marathon.
Aira is a service developed specifically to give the blind instant access to information using a smartphone, a video camera, and a remote-sighted agent. We'll talk with Erich Manser, a blind long-distance runner and triathlete, and Jess Jakeway, a sighted distant runner who served as Erich's remote guide using Aira at the 2017 Boston Marathon from quite a distance. But first for our tip of the week. This week's tip is, as technology develops, you might find that you are able to use it to help you do things that were previously more difficult.
And this show is a great example of how changing technology can open up new opportunities for us to do things in different ways.
And it doesn't even need to be a technical task.
Support for Eyes on Success is provided by
Top Tech Tidbits, the week's news in access technology, a free weekly email newsletter and online resource for current news and trends in access technology. More information, including how to subscribe, is available at toptechtidbits.com.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Let's start by meeting Erich and Jess.
So one of our guests today is Erich, who has actually been on the show twice before, once in episode 1617, talking about running the Boston Marathon with a celebrity guide, who happens to be Peter Sagal of NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And the other time he was on the show was in episode 1629, talking about his accessibility work at IBM. So, Erich, for our listeners who haven't heard you before, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're doing these days?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Erich Manser. I live just outside Boston here in Massachusetts. I am 44 years old. I live with my wife, Lisa, and our two daughters, Ellie and Grace. And, I do work for IBM. I am someone who has been gradually losing my eyesight over many years. I have a degenerative eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. So being someone who works in accessible technology at IBM is very gratifying. It's nice to feel like you contribute firsthand to making technology more accessible to all people. In addition to that, I like to stay active. I grew up being involved in athletics and trying to stay fit and healthy. And so today I'm, delighted to still be able to do things like run marathons and participate in triathlons. And, certainly the assistance I get from sighted guides as well as some of the exciting emerging technologies that we're seeing coming along are helping me continue to do that.
Were you an adult or a child when you started losing your vision?
I was diagnosed, at age 5. I had this condition that typically leads to blindness. I've almost started to identify it as a benefit because I feel like I've had years to kind of plan and prepare for vision loss. So now at 44, it has been a steady progression, and, I could drive a car until about 15 years ago, and then I gave that up when it didn't feel safe anymore. And so it's just been a process, but, what I have remaining today I describe as if you were to look through like a drinking straw that you cover with wax paper on the end of it. So, I've got a kind of a small circle of central clouded vision remaining.
And our other guest today is new to Eyes on Success. Can you introduce yourself, Jess?
Hi, I am Jess Jakeway. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I know Erich because I work for Aira as an agent analyst. And we'll get into that more later, but I've been with Aira for about a year. I started as an independent contractor as an agent, and now as an agent analyst, I have a team of about 13 agents that I oversee throughout the country. And we do training, hiring, reviewing the agents, all that fun stuff, as well as a lot of other special projects that come about in the startup world.
And I assume you are fully sighted.
Yes, so I am a fully sighted agent. All of our agents are, and they can be anywhere, like I said, in the U.S. We are based in San Diego, but originally, all of the agents were based there. And then we decided, there's no reason we couldn't be remote, and that actually helped us to extend our hours. So the East Coasters, like Erich and I, can work together, different times.
Great.
And in your spare time, what do you like to do?
So I am very active as well. Not nearly as active as Erich, but I am a runner as well. I have completed about 10 half marathons, 2 full marathons, and I'm working on my 3rd right now. I'll be doing the Chicago Marathon in October.
What fun.
Support for Eyes on Success comes from our listeners and corporate sponsors.
For more information about airing promotional items on the show, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
This week's focus topic is how Erich was able to run the Boston Marathon, guided by Jess, while she was over 750 miles away.
Before we get into some of the details of how Erich participated in the Boston Marathon with Jess's assistance, maybe, Jess, you can tell us a little bit about what Aira is and how it all works.
Absolutely. So Aira is a unique service where we connect sighted agents all across the U.S. with blind users. They can also be anywhere in the U.S. And what we do is we give them a pair of Aira smart glasses that have a camera. And on that camera, we're able to get a live video stream that goes directly to the agents. So a user like Erich would call in during our business hours. We're open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Most places in the U.S., and it just depends on where you are. We're actually open till 1 a.m. then East Coast. But you're able to instantly connect with an agent, and the agent has a dashboard that we've created that allows them to see that live video stream. So we would be seeing everything from the user's perspective, and we're able to describe that in real time. And we also have their GPS location integrated with Google Maps. So we see their location, and we can guide them. We'll pull up directions for walking, or we can use maps. Like a lot of our users will be in an airport. So they'll call in, we'll pull up the map, we can navigate them to baggage claims, things that they would normally have a sighted person maybe helping them with. We're able to step right in, and it really gives them a lot of independence to do things on their own time. And we also are integrated with Uber as well. So that's something that I think is a neat feature. If a user likes to use Uber, then we can call Uber on their behalf during the call. And we can see where the Uber driver is located, see their photo, their car information, and their license plate. So just that added safety is a really nice feature. We've been around about 2.5 years.
So this is like having a set of remote eyeballs for a visually impaired person who has these glasses.
Yes, and we actually like to say that we think of ourselves like we want to think as a set of eyes, not as a brain. So we're never replacing anybody's mobility tools, be it a cane or a guide dog. We're just an added resource for them.
Is there any special training that your agents go through, or they just learn on the job how to interact and what a blind person needs?
Nope. So we have a really extensive training process, and we're actually really selective. We had over 1,000 applicants for our last round of hiring. And we do a pre-screening test that actually has them do things, again, like navigation-based. So using Google Maps and other tools on the internet to answer questions that we've provided to them. And then past that, we do select, based on resumes, and we do an extensive interview. And then finally, once they are hired, we have a really nice training program we put together. One thing we like to do is have a workshop. So all of the new agents can do a 4-hour workshop where we work with them directly, go over everything that, we would be doing as agents. And then we also have actual training with blind users. We do at least 2 to 3 of those where we are coaching and observing them on a live call. So we don't set them free without any training. It's definitely extensive. And we also are able to watch recordings of their calls and make sure that everything is going smoothly. And we also allow the users to rate each call. So it's kind of like Uber in that sense. So they're able to give us comments and reviews so we can, again, make sure everybody is up to par and working smoothly.
Nice. And Erich, what was your first connection with Aira and Jessica?
About a year ago, I started as pretty much a beta tester for Aira.
As a beta tester, Erich, which aspects of the experience were you giving them feedback on?
Yeah, it really ran the gamut. It was anything from, network reliability, like it's a dedicated AT&T network that the Aira service is working on these days. And, so any drop calls, we would document that and make a note of that, or really like user experience stuff, a lot of that.
One thing I wanted to add in real quick, if I could, Erich mentioned the use of the AT&T MiFi. And I did forget to mention that's something we send out as well. So when a user signs up, they do get the smart glasses as well as the MiFi device. So that is part of your subscription. You don't pay separately for either of those. So that's a nice feature as far as not using your personal data on your cell phone, because it's all going to go through that MiFi.
You mentioned that the users pay for this service. Is it a monthly fee or a per minute fee or a per interaction fee, or how does that work?
Yes. So how it's set up is for the typical user, it is a subscription-based monthly fee, and you get different amounts of minutes based on each plan. We have 4 different plans, and we definitely have users all over the spectrum. What's nice is that you're not locked into any contract. You can start low, and if you see you're going to be using it a lot, you can always increase it. And if you, for whatever reason, if you did get it and use it a month and didn't like it, you could cancel without any, issues. But honestly, once people start, they really do get, I don't want to say addicted, but they do. They call in a lot. They like it a lot. And we have a bit of it's almost like a forum. We have a listserv where people can communicate to each other, the users, and they can communicate directly with our staff. And people are always sharing new ideas, fun ideas, and if they do have any comments to make or improvements they think could help.
I'm constantly realizing new and different uses for it myself, like in my day-to-day. Like as another example, just a couple of weeks ago, actually, I was out on a Saturday doing errands with my wife and daughters, and we had stopped and they had run into a store, and we had identified, what restaurant we wanted to go to, as a family for lunch once they got done with whatever they needed to do at this particular store. And so, thinking ahead, out on a bright sunny day, I take out my iPhone. As someone with low vision, I oftentimes can struggle trying to pull up a restaurant's website and identifying what it is I'd like to order once we get there. Well, the fact that I now have access to the Aira service, right? Like I was pulling up this website of this deli that we were going to go to and found that it wasn't very low vision friendly. This time I was able to engage an Aira agent and say, can you pull up this website and can you kind of run through the appetizers and the, what kind of sandwiches they have? So, it was just such a liberating experience. In the past, this limitation could have shut me down and I would have had to wait or ask my daughters to tell me what the menu said, but, I was empowered and able to kind of identify ahead of time and overcome the accessibility issues.
Well, that can be pretty handy. So I take it you don't have to schedule these interactions. An agent is generally pretty much available when you need them.
Absolutely. On demand, man.
Great. So now you guys went through beta testing this in real life and giving feedback, Erich, to people like Jessica, and then you eventually decided to take on a bigger challenge and decided to run the Boston Marathon with some assistance. How did that all work?
If nothing else, you were moving a lot faster than when you were trying to walk down the streets of Boston to get to a meeting.
Absolutely. No, it was definitely a different sort of experience. And, I'm always very candid. Like, we knew up front that Aira today, and, at the time, Aira at the time was not something I would simply hand to a blind person and say, here, go run a marathon. And, so we knew that, people were getting great value from the technology, doing things like, getting assistance at the grocery store or navigating the airport. But running a marathon with 30,000 other people at a faster pace, sharing the same race course, was a unique challenge.
One might call that a stress test.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Extreme testing scenario. So we knew that going in. We were very practical. Like, I still took a lot of the same precautions that I've always taken when running a marathon. I still had an in-person human guide with me that was there physically with me. We still wore the blind and guide identifying bibs, that let others around us know. We still, used a tether. And because Boston Marathon is so crowded, my preference over time has become to have at least 2 guides.
And as I recall, you actually used your backup runner when you were running with Peter Sagal because he wasn't feeling so good in the middle of the race.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so at any time, if you can have 2 or 3 guides in that unique Boston situation, that's beneficial. And so this year, I had one of my IBM colleagues, David, a good friend of mine, David Way, that agreed to run as my in-person guide. And as we were preparing for Boston, I was still doing a lot of rehearsal running with Jess, and so David and Jess came to know each other and work together and stuff. And so I still very much consider it as having 2 guides. I had Jess, even though she was in Ohio, she was still very much a guide.
She was comfortably sitting at a computer while you were sweating buckets on this race.
Except he could have bathroom breaks. I had to stay put.
I was wondering about that. I was going to ask about that.
Well, didn't you get a break when he got a break?
Well, it was a funny circumstance because I thought about that. I was like, here's Erich hydrating and fueling up, and I thought I better not eat anything. I better just sit here because I wanted to be ready. So it was fine and it went great, but it was just a funny circumstance because I'm used to running, and those pre-race jitters were still there for me, but in a whole new form.
So, Erich, you said you had a physical guide, David, present, and you were also relying on Jessica, who you were hearing through your Bluetooth earbuds. Could David and Jessica hear each other, and could Jessica hear Erich, and how did that all work?
Well, honestly, that was actually one of the challenges that we realized. Jessica wasn't able to hear David, and David wasn't able to hear Jessica. But ideally, if Aira gets to a point where that could be the technology solution that I'm using in that scenario, then it would replace the need to have a physical in-person guide with me. And to be honest with you, one of the most interesting realizations of the experience running in Boston was, most of the practice runs that Jessica and I did together, with her helping me remotely, were out here in Metro Boston, like out in the suburbs. And, I would run on quiet country back roads where Jessica could be just as descriptive and detailed as the Aira agents are trained to be. And she could say, okay, you've got a left-hand turn coming up in about 10 steps and, kind of count me down to the point where I need to make that turn. And, what we found quickly in Boston was you didn't have that kind of time. It was very real that, you had other runners that were jockeying for position that would very suddenly jump right in front of you. And, all of a sudden, even though it was a very minuscule lag time, it was, something less than half a second's worth of lag time, it became much more apparent in the kind of challenging Boston scenario, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a highly dynamic situation. And even though she can see out your camera glasses, I'm sure you don't get a good peripheral sense, and you certainly don't know what's in back of you as a runner in the actual arena would.
Absolutely. And so, ultimately, I really consider the Aira experience in the Boston Marathon to have been a wonderful success. But the biggest thing about it is it was an opportunity to kind of put this technology through these paces, like literally through these paces. And, to come back and say, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. And again, to the credit of the Aira team, they hear all that feedback and they take it and they act on it. So even though Aira might not today be something you'd hand a blind person and say, here, go run a marathon, can you imagine if it could be? And, by sharing the feedback of what worked well and what could use some improvement, ideally it'll give them the opportunity to look at some of those changes, consider implementing some of them, and, ultimately pushing the technology further even.
Well, that's why we test these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, Erich, I was going to tell you, it's kind of interesting the more I think about this, because one thing Erich and I actually developed pre-race, and then even as we were doing it, I was going to say while I was running, but I wasn't running. But mid-race, we would cut things really short. We'd keep our interaction a lot more efficient than normal. So as he said, he had kind of warned me that he wouldn't be his typical friendly self as far as talking. One, because it would be hard to hear, and two, because he'd actually be racing. But, we tried to keep things simple. So like as he passed over cups, I would simply say cups or runner on the right. As he had his sighted guide with him, he was on his left. So I kind of kept more of an eye on the right-hand side. So that was helpful too, to know who would be where and what to look out for. And oftentimes Erich, likes to stay along the yellow line. So I would let him know if he was close to that yellow line or if a path was narrowing. So again, just keeping it more simple. Mm-hmm. And actually that has really helped us even in our current endeavors at Aira, because we're thinking of stealth mode, times where people might want us to not be so chatty, not that we're chatty, but even they don't want all of the description we would normally give. Maybe they're in a conference room and they don't want to say who they are and explain what they want. We may have a stealth mode developed where we would simply guide them to a chair and know that that's what they want. They could press a button and tell us, simple commands, and we would give them those descriptions. So, all of these unique cases have really helped us in the long run. No pun intended. And as you said, this isn't going to be our typical use anytime soon. This was a very unique circumstance, but absolutely, we have a lot of people who are out doing physical things that maybe they haven't felt inspired to or didn't think they could in a long time. So, for instance, we had a user who actually went bowling for the first time in 20 years, and she had a blast, and she used Aira for the whole thing. So, I think it's so neat to see how all of these different uses are inspiring other users as well.
I'm wondering, Jessica, Erich described what it was like from his position, but I'm wondering what it was like from your position. I mean, you mentioned earlier that, you couldn't take a bathroom break during this time, but I was also wondering, was it stressful for you knowing that Erich was relying on this feedback and not 100% knowing whether it was going to work? What were your reactions?
Oh, candidly, yes, I was horrified. I did have some pre-race jitters, and we definitely had an all-hands-on-deck situation as far as, making sure all of the tech pieces were practiced ahead of time, and we had different options as far as even I think we had different headsets that he could try to see what was most comfortable, what he could hear best with. So, yeah, I was definitely nervous, hoping everything worked that day. Overall, though, I was more excited than anything, and I was just anxious to hear Erich's voice that morning, and he sounded good and excited, and, honestly, could some things have gone better? Absolutely. But I think for the most part, it was a really exciting experience, and I was able to see things as if I was running it myself. And I'm not nearly as fast as Erich, so I may not ever run it. So for me to get to see that view was really neat as well. It was like a secondhand runner's high. That's how I like to describe it.
It sounds like you guys both really enjoyed the experience. Would you do it again?
I think that we may be on the hook to try it again next year with some new improvements that came as a result of this. So yeah, no, I'd be on board with testing out any new enhancements or anything that they implement as a result, and I'd be excited for the opportunity. I don't want to sign Jess up.
Well, here I am. I'm getting committed. Yeah, I would absolutely be excited too. I think my April's pretty open.
Nice.
Well, you both seem to have survived and had a lot of fun doing this.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Now for this week's final item, how to reach Jess or Erich or Aira, as well as some other related resources.
Anyway, if people want to find out more about Aira, where would they go, Jess?
You can just go to aira.io is our website.
Can you spell that?
Yes, sorry. It's AIRA. So that's how you say Aira. And people do get it confused a lot, but I always think of I, and that helps. So aira.io. And our website, you can find the 4 different plans for subscription. We also are frequently hiring new agents, so we always take applications on there as well.
And what is the origin of the name Aira?
So the AI is artificial intelligence, and Ra is the Egyptian god of sun. So it is a unique name. That's kind of how it all came together.
And as an agent, do you mind being referred to as artificial intelligence?
Well, I think it's actually looking a little more into the future. I don't want to speak too far out in advance, but we are making new changes or on the way. We are going to be integrating with the KNFB reader. So some of our features, if it is a more simple task, then it will be more of an automated thing. So that is in our future. So we definitely never want to take away that human aspect. So that's going to be something, of course, if it's running a marathon, I don't think that's going to be a fully automated thing. So we would still be present for that. But if it is just simply reading a label, for instance, that may be automated.
As you can learn from last week's episode, number 2443, Aira has, in fact, incorporated artificial intelligence in many ways.
And if people had questions for either of you, how might they contact you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Erich Manser.
And does Aira have a social media presence?
Absolutely. So we do have a Twitter and Facebook accounts, and those are very active with a lot of our users. So I would definitely recommend checking those out as well.
Since we originally aired this episode, both Jess and Erich have moved on to new jobs, and so they both have new email addresses. And although Jess is no longer working at Aira, you can contact Erich at manserlikedancer@gmail.com. That's manserlikedancer@gmail.com. Erich is a very active, in many senses of the word, blind athlete. Are there any resources that you would like to direct other incipient blind athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. I am very involved each year at the Boston Marathon with Team with a Vision, which is a charitable group that is put on by Mass Association for the Blind. They have developed a resource called United in Stride for any blind athletes in North America that are looking for sighted guides to run with. So unitedinstride.com is a great resource. Also, getting involved or active with other, the international organizations like Achilles or the USABA, the United States Association of Blind Athletes, all have great resources for blind or visually impaired people that are just trying to stay active and stay out there doing stuff.
And also, Eyes on Success has done a number of episodes on various types of sports. And if you just type sports or exercise or the particular type of activity that you're interested in into the search field, you can find those. And in particular, we did episode 1607 about United in Stride, in which we talked with Erich's friend, Kyle Robidoux.
And you can find all of those resources and contact information in the show notes associated with this episode, which is episode 2444, at our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net.
That's it for today's show. Next week on Eyes on Success, we'll be talking about shopping made simple. Discover how InnoSearch AI is revolutionizing online shopping for people with visual impairments. We'll talk with Patrick Long and Brian Huang, co-founders of InnoSearch AI, about their artificial intelligence-powered platform designed to make shopping easier and more accessible with a simplified interface and the ability to ask questions of the AI tool.
And this is really a great and simple website to use, especially for people using a screen reader. So we hope you'll join us next week to hear that episode.
You've been listening to Eyes on Success, hosted and produced by Nancy Torpey and Peter Torpey.
You can access the full archive of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, and much more by going to our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net. If you have questions about anything you've heard on the show or have suggestions for future shows, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
Thank you for listening and have a nice day.